Hi everyone,
Good evening.
this is Jenny and Malcolm with our live stream, which we try and do about once a month. We've been away most of January and part of February. We had a very exciting, what we would call the bucket list trip. We joined the National Health Association, the NHA, that the organisers we know, they're from America. They had organised a cruise ship to Antarctica, and we put our names down about 2 years ago, and it was fantastic. We had the cruise was 11 days, and we ate from the buffet for breakfast and lunch, and had a whole food plant-based a la carte dinner.
The National Health Association group had over 40 people on the ship. So out of the 220, we had our own buffet section for the plant-based people.
They wouldn't let us have any more than 30 people because I don't think they thought they could provision for us in that region. So it was an absolute blast. And it's not going that far. We also spent quite a few weeks in Argentina, in particular in Patagonia, doing some hiking and looking at some of the wonderful sites there. So that's why you didn't hear from us again for more than a month. And here we are now. And before we get into the I'll just mention that we've got a few events coming up. Next Sunday, we're starting our 5-part webinar series. We, for 5 years, ran a 4-part webinar series. The last session, part 4. So last October, then we split the last session into 2, and so now we've been committed to doing a 5-part series, and we've got a nice small group already registered. But if anyone's interested in joining us, this is where we run through, the why whole food plant-based diet, what the evidence is, which I know can be difficult in this day and age because there are so many people going down an opposite path to the path that we recommend. And then we unpack what, really down to quite a bit of detail. What is a whole food plant-based diet? And so we had a plate up. And the third session, I talk about calorie density, which we think is the absolute key to getting this right. And the 4th session is all our practical tips for transitioning, shopping, label reading. And the last session, which is what we've sort of taken out of that 4th session and given it its own space, is about really dealing with others. We call it navigating the road less travelled. And any of you who've been doing this for some time will know that it can be really difficult when no one in your circle of friends or family are interested in doing what we're doing, which is eating a whole food plant-based diet. So that's starting next Sunday. We do the first one on a Sunday, the second one on a Wednesday evening, and the following sessions 3, 4, and 5 will also be on Wednesday evening. So just 2 in the first week, and then
it's a live education series, so people get most out of it if they actually turn up live. But we do record the sessions so that if someone can't come to one of the sessions, they can watch the recording. But it's really designed and packaged, and there's a significant amount of group interaction for live attendance.
And you get to ask us all your nutrition questions. So here's the 75 who are new to eating this way, then absolutely. But also we find quite a few people have participated in our webinar series who've been doing this for quite a few years, and they get a lot out of it, just being able to pick our brains and sort of go through some of the detail, maybe identify a few areas that they could improve on. So that is our 5-part webinar series. I'll put a link in the comment stream of both YouTube and Facebook. And of course, the other thing is our immersion, our 7-day immersion. We've got one starting late April. We'll be doing a little bit of publicity about this over the next few weeks. Again, we've still got some spaces available. It will be the only 7-day immersion that we're doing in 2026. That's due to limitations at the centre that we use. They're getting quite busy themselves, and so they need to restrict groups like us coming in and running our events. So we're just doing one there this year. We might also do a weekend retreat in Queenscliff, which we've done over the last 2 years, but we don't have dates for that yet. Okay, it's enough about what we're doing. To introduce tonight's topic, I know a few weeks ago, or was it a month ago, we might have been away at the time, the American Dietary Guidelines came out, and it caused quite a lot of angst because it seemed that the subtext was recommending, in fact, more meat consumption, more dairy consumption. And there's been a lot of people in the plant-based world, groups like Student Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, making comment, trying to push back on this. But we just want to go through what what our take is and what we've seen in Australia of the impact, even of the release of the American Dietary Guidelines. Note that the Australian Dietary Guidelines are updated every 2 years, but they're currently already running more than 2 years late. They were meant to be originally 2023. COVID pushed them back. It was meant to be draft by late 2025, and they haven't come out yet. Just a little edgy about what they're going to look like. So I might pass it on to you to pick up on.
Oh,
Take on.
thank you. For the start again here. I don't like some of the streams. There's some vague promises about doing a live stream on whole egg and perhaps another one on antioxidants. We're still going to do that. However, with the data showing increasing meat consumption worldwide, yeah, you're right, particularly red meat consumption worldwide soaring. In the new crazy US dietary guidelines encouraging even higher intakes, we thought that it was timely to review the findings of the EAT-Lancet Commission and explore what dietary guidelines might look like if they're more closely aligned with environmental science and nutrition science. Overall, we like to take a positive approach to our plant-based healthy lifestyle advocacy. We don't like to spend too much of our time, criticizing, other people and other organisations, although many of them certainly deserve it. But some critique of the US dietary guidelines brief, I mean, they're so bad. Could spend all day critiquing them. First of all, note the US dietary guidelines, this edition of them, did not come from their usual scientific committees. Those committees had been set up and running for several years, and they had they'd given their initial statement and they had their dietary guidelines just about ready to go. And then Robert Kennedy became health secretary. And Robert Kennedy, we know that the previous US dietary guidelines do have people involved who are sort of influenced by agriculture, let's say. But Robert Kennedy, chose a special group of people to be on his committee, I think maybe with even more reasonable agriculture representation. And some rewrote the dietary guidelines. So some people have been giving some credit saying, well, the US dietary guidelines, they're focusing on real foods, processed foods, this is good. And yes, it is. I give them no credit for that, however. Why? Previous US dietary guidelines setting the slogan, not eat real foods, but make every mouthful count or every bite count or something, in other words, and eat rich foods. I don't think there's any dietary guidelines around food world that say, plenty of processed food. So there's really nothing unique or new or anything to give points for. This group took the pyramid like this and it's all flipped upside down. So the tip of the triangle was down the bottom. And along the top, on one side was protein, dairy, and healthy fats, and over to the right of the upside down triangle were vegetables and fruits. It's good to see they were still in there. And right down the very bottom, with that list of was whole grains. And you know, almost people actually calling them whole grains was previous guidelines, and Australian guidelines have just had a group called grains. But previous guidelines, recommended predominantly whole grains, or at least half whole grains. And the new guidelines sort of get to where they are by subtracting off the non-whole grains and just retaining a tiny amount, rather pitiful amount of whole grains in their daily recommendations. Remember the actual text and recommendations of the guidelines. They said, white no carbs protein, and recommended 50 to 100% more protein that is currently accepted around the world as the basic human requirement. And that's predominantly from animal products being listed there. Then they also advocated for more good fats. You might be thinking, olive oil and seed oils, Kennedy's got it in for seed oils. So the good fats included the fat and full fat dairy foods, even butter, and bizarrely tallow, beef fat. These guidelines, but the guidelines retained the old recommendation to have no more than 10% of calories from saturated fat. If you actually that was from the old guidelines. They've left that in there, but if you actually follow up the new guidelines, you'd actually breach that 10% anyway. So they were internally inconsistent. Let me just find my place. In vegan diets, got a huge thumbs down with a long list of potential nutrient deficiencies. Some nutrients are quite plentiful in plant-based diets, like, if you eat any fruits and veg, you'll get lots of carotenoids, which are vitamin A precursors. And plant-based foods have lots of magnesium and potassium. They were listed as, nutrients we'd run out of on plant-based diets. So they were not vegan or vegetarian friendly at all.
Hang on, someone's just commented that the sound is very distorted. Oh dear, we can't tell. Can someone else confirm whether anyone else is hearing a distorted sound? That would not be good. I don't know if the sound distorted is just that one person. Anyway, sorry to interrupt. You better keep going. But if that's just had sound problems before, it's not as it's very distorted. Live streams, I'd usually ask that at the start, but it's worked the last few times. What is going on?
Okay, we've changed it. Report on this.
No.
Testing sound.
What a shame. You were having so much fun.
So is it no better, or was that previous?
No, that was a previous comment just as I was changing.
So before Jenny,
it's a
I think it's a
buffering
buffering issue because the image freezes occasionally as well. Okay.
But can you hear us at all? Someone says 10 out of 10.
Good. Okay.
All right, let's stick with that.
Let's soldier on then. Let's soldier on.
Sorry about that, guys.
Yeah,
this is so frustrating.
I've heard it said before, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing repeatedly and expecting different results, but it actually happens quite frequently with our IT systems. We do the same thing as before, and this time we get a different result. Why do the US dietary guidelines even matter? Why does it matter what happens in the US of A, other than that, they're a huge group of consumers and having huge impact upon the world? And well, they matter because they influence nutrition, the nutrition meme globally. Remember, we commented that meat, particularly red meat consumption, is already increasing globally. And we think that the US guidelines will or has actually emboldened advocates of the low carb, high meat diets, the Atkins style diets. They seem emboldened. I've already seen this in my medical media, um, where two well-known low carb meat eating expert doctors, whom I won't name
No,
in case
no
they sue
names.
me, have both sort of expressed positive things about the guidelines and continue to push their line that we can treat chronic disease, prevent diabetes through eating more meat, which is just not in line with the evidence. Anyway, that's enough of the negative. The EAT-Lancet has trauma therapy for the US dietary guidelines. On one of my long flights, I went and found the EAT-Lancet Commission second report, which came out in 2025 in October of last year as a follow-up to the groundbreaking EAT, as in EAT-Lancet report of 2019. The EAT-Lancet Commission in its 2025 report just sort of updated the analysis, expanded the scope, strengthened the evidence base that it had, and provided some more quantitative data on what's known as the planetary boundaries, about 9 planetary systems that humans impact on, and 6 of them have been transgressed or are now in an unsustainable state. 5 of those are at least in part driven by food. I think the 2025 report also dealt a bit more with food systems in relation to equity and social justice, and they considered some of our human rights to be the right to food, a healthy environment, and decent work. Um, uh, I'll go back to there's no major changes to what the 2019 report was recommending, just a few more nuances and just filling in more of the gaps in data and things. But I'll use some of the EAT-Lancet Commission's own words to describe their work. The Commission brings together 19 commissioners and 18 co-authors from 16 countries. This is like a who's who of the experts in the fields of human health, agriculture, and political sciences, and environmental sustainability. And their aim was to develop global scientific targets based on the best evidence available for healthy diets and sustainable food production. This is really powerful stuff. This is nothing less than a science and data-based roadmap for feeding humanity into the future. And the Commission developed a universal healthy reference diet, which they called the planetary health diet, that was fairly flexible, could be adapted to different cultures around the world. And in their own worlds, it largely consists of vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and unsaturated oils, includes a low to moderate amount of seafood and poultry, and includes no or a low quantity of red meat, processed meat, added sugar, refined grains, and starchy vegetables. A pity the US dietary guidelines sort of missed this, because they're quite on a different track to that. But let's take a critical look at some of their reference ranges. And this is a bit critical because we take a bit of a different view. We don't think that adding animal-based foods to the diet enhances health at all. So they had whole grains, quite a lot. I think they said like 232 grams a day, 800 calories out of 2,500. They give a really wide range, 0 to 60% of energy. But, the Harvard Health studies looking at US nurses and doctors, health professionals, didn't see very good associations with potatoes. I'm not surprised with the way that the US eat potatoes. So they only recommend a small amount of potatoes and cassava, like 50 grams a day. And a lot of these criteria, they do go down to, you don't have to have them, it can be 0. I wonder where sweet potatoes are, because I think you could have a very sweet potato strong diet and be very healthy. And in fact, I'd give potatoes more credibility than that. Then they had all vegetables. It was like 300 grams a day. What's that, about 4 serves or so, and they specified sort of a minimum amounts of dark green, red and orange, and other vegetables. And the vegetables didn't have a sort of zero quantity. They started at about 3 serves a day, and they had all fruit. And again, they recommended at least a couple of bits of fruit a day. I think they said 100 to 300 grams. Then they got to milk, and I read another commentary somewhere else that Walter Willett, who we greatly respect from the Harvard Health Studies, their group, the health experts, thought that that we'd be better off with 2 cups of milk a day, but it would transgress planetary boundaries if it was more than 1 cup. So the actual final guidelines sort of recommend that humanity have no more than an average of 1 cup of whole milk or equivalents per day. We'd leave them out completely. And then they got to so-called protein sources, and this is interesting. Like beef and lamb, 7 grams, 0 to 14 grams a day for the whole of humanity, and you think 7 grams, like that's not much. That'd be a chunk, one chunk on a fork. Pork was similar amount. Chicken, they allowed a bit more chicken and poultry. I
But
think
not much more.
not more. No, it was 30 grams. Like it was 0 to 60 grams a day. It was not a 200-gram slab of chicken. 13 grams of eggs. That's less than one egg. That's a fraction of an egg a day. Fish 0 to 100 grams, or averaging 28 grams, which is probably about a fifth of a standard slab of salmon or something. And legumes in there. I was surprised they didn't put more legumes, the quantities of legumes. Tree nuts got a fairly small number, probably because they're actually quite a big environmental impact, water use, etc.
Just there's been a question: how much spud is 50 grams? It's like less than half a potato, so it's not much.
Yeah, not much, not much. I think potatoes got a bad rap in this report because of the results of the Harvard Health Studies. And they had a few things with oils. They even had tallow in there, no more than 5 grams a day, starting at 0. All sweeteners or added sugars, 0 to 31 grams. That's about 6 teaspoons a day, or 120 calories. So that they had that pretty low. So that's sort of what they recommended. So it was interesting following those. And in the EAT-Lancet report, they stated that food systems can provide healthy diets for an estimated population of 10 billion people by 2050 and remain within safe operating space, as in environmental operating space. However, even small increases in the consumption of red meat and dairy foods would make this goal difficult or impossible to achieve. So,
it's not a good thing that meat consumption is now increasing.
It's not a good thing. No,
Not
it's
for the planet,
it's
not for our
a
health.
disaster. It's like seeing coal burning balloon across the world, and no amount of greenwashing by groups in Australia or elsewhere will really sort of undo these facts. Although they've been trying quite hard to greenwash meat and dairy. She's been trying to greenwash meat ever since Cowspiracy came out. So what about the Australian dietary guidelines? Well, as Jenny explained, they were delayed and delayed and delayed, and we're not going to say what is going on there because we don't know, and we're really expecting more of the same. Perhaps more protein for older adults. Industry's been working on that for years, or a more prominent positioning of olive oil. We're not expecting anything radically different. Certainly nothing like the crazy US guidelines. But we'll provide a lot of commentary when the guidelines are finally released. They'll be released as the draft dietary guidelines, but I can't see that their final ones will be much different to that. I could have a word to them about the draft ones, but I don't think they'll listen to us. Groups like Doctors for Nutrition have been working on this and working on the scoping that was done a few years ago. So what if our dietary guidelines were independent of food system lobbyists? There, Jenny, I haven't even mentioned any industry groups in Australia. They can't sue me. And were sustainable locally and at a global level. What if meat and dairy or those, or equivalents, were not considered sort of the sort of essential core of the guidelines in the diet, or they dared to challenge the Australian, meat and dairy strong culture. Well, I think the planetary health diet would be an ideal starting point for the Australian dietary guidelines. Perhaps they could dumb it down a bit to make the transition smoother. Not have one or two forkfuls of red meat to start with, but allow more forkfuls in the first edition. Um, we've often thought about how we would make the current guidelines more whole foods, plant-based friendly, because it is a little bit difficult to fit a whole foods, plant-based healthy diet into the current dietary guidelines. Well, we delete the dairy group. First up, Canada did that when they decided they'd cut all industry ties with their guidelines committee and make it independent of industry. And I think they just lumped dairy in with the sort of meat protein group. Uh, I- I'd also give whole grains a second position in the protein group. After all, calorie for calories, they've got about as much protein as the nuts have, and they're in there. Um, and I'd borrow a term from lifestyle medicine, from international lifestyle medicine, and that is a whole food, plant predominant diet, and squarely sit that at the centre of our dietary guidelines. So, we're both happy about that the science is out there and it's published on where we should go, but we're also sort of in a little bit of a state of trauma about the direction nutrition's been taking and the success of some industry groups in the last couple of decades. If you'd asked me in 1990, this is not where I thought nutrition would be in the world.
Even in 2015, I thought that we were going in a good direction. When the World Health Organization declared red meat a class 1, or processed meat a class 1
Processed meat a class
carcinogen.
1 carcinogen, yeah.
Mm.
And with all the data, all the numerous studies and reviews coming out over the last couple of years, like linking red meat to increasing to diabetes. Anyway, yes, there's a bit of anguish there. Um, but I think my final statement is, we have the roadmap for healthy diets from sustainable systems for everyone. So it distresses me to see food industry groups, low carb and low carb advocates, selfishly steering humanity towards future suffering.
Oh, that's a bit of a negative note.
Oh, it's a negative note to finish on. Oh, I'm sorry, Jenny.
I guess we come back to what we see our role as, and that is to help all of you who are wanting to steer this path. We can't have much impact on those that don't want to know the message, but we hopefully can have an impact on those who are wanting to steer a path of a whole food, plant predominant diet, and sort of help you optimise that. So that's what we come back to focusing on, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, and when we read negative things, happening in nutrition and things, we bring ourselves back to, what positive impact can we have? And a couple of years ago, we decided that our mission, other than changing the world and changing the Australian dietary guidelines and all these other things, um, that our mission and the work we do is really to provide education and support for individuals and small groups who have sort of who are doing whole foods plant-based, or sort of somehow seen it and would like our help.
Thanks, Dale. Yes, one of the things when people question, I mean, even within the plant-based world, there are people that question, how, there's been recent, not so much criticism, but dismissing like an Esselstyn style diet for a healthy heart. And comes back to the comment that Dale's just said, she lives the reality. When you eat this way, and you get the animal foods out of the diet, the sodium low, relatively low fat, you know, whole plant foods, and most people feel so well. And it's like that's where the evidence is, but we can't capture that in terms of the science. The science always has to be really cautious in in the way it presents, and when there's been clinical trials even done by including a whole food plant-based diet in one arm of the trial, it's still really hard to get people who haven't necessarily wanted to make changes, and so they often don't get any remarkable results. And that's how you get the science saying, "Oh, well, there's no evidence that
Or
X,
that
Y, and Z."
diet only lowers cholesterol by a small amount. It's been called the small parachute effect, and that is, if you do a study that really the dietary changes are not big enough and not adhered to closely enough, it's like doing a study on parachutes, and because the parachutes are too small, people still all get injured and die, and you conclude that parachutes don't really work very well.
There's a good question on salt intake. Yes, is it directly related to water retention based weight gain? Well, there's more than that with salt intake, and we can show you a very good an FAQ that we did on salt a couple of years ago. The more we looked into the literature, the more we found salt increases bloating. Salt can increase arthritis pain. There's a whole host of things that a relatively high
And
salt
salt
diet
is
will do.
also, it's a good flavour enhancer, appetite stimulant.
Appetite, yeah.
So it is also, drives overeating.
So, yes, it also has the impact. Most people think about it as impacting on blood pressure, which it does, but there's so much more than that. And my former career as a librarian, when I go looking for research, someone that I knew was, who liked a lot of salt in their diet, was eating a fairly healthy diet, but had increasing cataracts developing. And I went and found, yep, there's some science to show high salt diets associated with. There's just so many things, so many reasons why we think it's important to keep the salt low. It's not about a no added salt diet, but if you're going to add anything salty, such as a bit of miso
One slice of bread.
or commercially bought bread, you have to notice just how much you're getting. Is it a couple of 100 milligrams of sodium in that one piece of bread? Okay, that might not harm you in that day, but don't go eating 4 slices of it. That'll be nearing what we would recommend as your day's total sodium intake. So it's
The new US dietary guidelines held the maximum sodium intake, not the recommended intake, but the maximum at 2,300 milligrams. Our current guidelines are 2,000 milligrams maximum sodium per day. It used to be 1,500, but they adjusted it with some funny comment some years ago.
To fit in with the food supply.
To fit in with the food supply. In other words, we caved into industry. We'd recommend less than 1,200 milligrams a day, and particularly for people who are really struggling to control their blood pressure. But otherwise, anyone who's having problems with weight gain or might have heart disease or has inflamed joints or autoimmune disease or gut bloating or even maybe respiratory conditions and skin conditions. Not many of us should be eating a lot of salt, really, when you look at it. Yeah, it's a difficult one, actually, and it's difficult because of our food supply and because a little bit of salt often makes things taste better.
And if you eat food prepared by others, by chefs, by people running cafes, it's going to be salty. That's just how they get the flavour. When you taste a soup and you go, oh, this is delicious, that's because there'll be added salt in there. Anyway, thanks for that question. Any other questions? Otherwise, we shall sign off. We try and only go for half an hour. I'm really sorry that we messed up our sound. I don't know what we can do about it with this platform. I'm going to have to investigate whether using StreamYard because we can't actually hear ourselves, and we can't necessarily test it unless we do a test.
Yeah, unless we listen to it on another computer with some earbuds at the beginning.
Next time I'll remember to ask someone in the first minute as to whether you can hear
No,
us.
we'll do some dummy runs when we attend
We'll do
our
a live
meeting.
stream where no one's watching.
Yeah, we'll do our own live stream to ourselves.
I mean, we can get it right with Zoom because you know, we quickly find out that it's you know, that it's not working. Anyway.
And we didn't even go as far as using. We've got a really fancy microphone.
Oh, well, because we had troubles with that late last year,
yeah.
so we just went with the stream cam. But it sounds like that's giving us problems now too. Anyway, thank you for listening. Nice group. I know that some of you might wonder where the questions are coming from. So we're streaming to Facebook and YouTube, and so we get to see the comments from both sources. So when we refer to a question, if you're not seeing it, it's because it's maybe on the other platform.
And someone's made a suggestion. You know, could we see what you two eat in a typical day, or a day with the gorillas? Next live stream.
Maybe we'll need to do that as a series of shorts. I don't know if anyone caught our the sushi making short. It only goes for a few minutes, and which we put up at the beginning of January. Maybe we'll try our hand at videoing ourselves in our kitchen. We'll see how that goes.
Okay.
Okay.
Good
Thanks
night.
everyone. Thanks for watching. Good night.